Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to Talos of Tech live on Twitch. This should be a somewhat interesting stream. Hopefully, it does not look or sound any different. That's what I'm going for. This should feel and sound like a fairly normal stream because right off camera here, I have. Can I pick it up? I could pick it up, but I'm worried about messing with some of the cables or wiring or something. To try to do today's Twitch stream off completely the M1 MacBook Air. So if you're wondering why my eyes are going down when I look at the chat a little bit more so, it's because I'm using a 13-inch notebook instead of a giant iMac Pro, which is normally up here. But the iMac Pro is off. Actually, ever since I unboxed the MacBook Air, I have done everything pretty much work-related. I did have to use the iMac Pro a couple times just to get things like the stream's countdown, music, and the intros and outros for the videos. I had to just airdrop them off the MacBook Air. But when it comes to Final Cut, when it comes to OBS and live streaming now, moving over just to fully test the Air and see if it can replace my normal work life. So now we can see how it looks according to you guys. Iron Joey says this feels like M1. I also wanted to thank Expos1 who subscribed with Twitch Prime 17 hours ago, which I didn't get to read his name, but it showed up in the notifications here, so he's probably not here. But either way, thank you. Video looks a lot better than usual, some people are saying. It could be because OBS has a bit higher bitrate than usual. I turned it up just to see how it would handle it, and seems to be running good. I could probably tinker my iMac Pro settings a bit to make it look more like this, but I think I had the bitrate set a little bit lower because in the past I've streamed on Twitch while I'm watching events, so there's more bandwidth going on than just like I am right now. But anyway, Gary's a Pig says looks smooth and sounds normal. Good, I'm glad to hear that. MacBook Air is amazing and fanless. That's the impressive thing I think about this Twitch stream is I'm streaming at 1080 at 60 off of a 5nm chip that has no fan in it. And I do have to plug in the MacBook Air. One thing I will say about OBS is it eats through battery life like no tomorrow. Battery life with my MacBook Air has been very, very impressive when I'm not doing anything power intensive. Once I do start doing something like Final Cut or OBS, that's when the battery life feels less impressive, but I'm sure it's still much better than before. I can guarantee you whatever the last MacBook Air was capable of, it wasn't this good. I promise you that. And this morning, actually, I just woke up and I picked up my MacBook Air to use for like kind of how I start the day usually is I just check Discord and Twitter for news and kind of interact with you guys a little bit just to see what's going on. And I used my MacBook Air for that this morning, and I think I was on it I was also using Safari in the background, checking different news sites and that kind of thing. So Twitter, Discord, Safari, all simultaneously and typing a lot. And it stayed at 100% for, I think, an hour. Maybe not quite a full 60 minutes, but close. Pretty dang close, because I picked it up at around 6 a.m. and I used it until around 7. So it was, and I checked the battery and it was still at 100% after like an hour of use. It didn't even drop to 99% until I brought the MacBook Air into my office and started editing a tech video on it. Then it started dropping pretty quickly. Once I did something fairly power intensive, it was like, nope, can't do this anymore. But let's see. Katrina Bryce says, I suspect the old MacBook Air would be a pool of molten metal by now. Yes, I can guarantee you that. Someone was asking, does it feel warm to the touch? And pretty warm. I'm touching just that little metal piece right above the function keys, and it's definitely a little bit warm. But you know what I've noticed is I think it helps that my house in general is fairly cold right now. We're not in a very hot climate anymore, so just the environment it is in is fairly cold, and that's probably helping it. But the fact that pretty much every time I use OBS, I'm used to the fans kind of kicking in on my iMac Pro a little bit, and you can kind of hear the air pumping out of it. And the fact that this can't even do that, it doesn't have the option to, is pretty crazy. Like, it's dead silent in here when I'm not talking. It's just nothing, which is very bizarre. I'm not used to that. On any MacBook I've ever been able to do any type of dedicated streaming like this, it's always had to kick in the fans, especially MacBooks that don't have dedicated GPUs. If they don't have a dedicated GPU and you start live streaming, you're going to sound like a 747 trying to take off. It's just It cranks up like crazy. You know, honestly, even if you do try to stream with a 16-inch MacBook Pro and it has a dedicated GPU, you'll hear those fans kick in because OBS just loves to consume all the processing power it can. So the fact that the M1 chip is handling this, I'm impressed by. And yeah, to answer your question, Alpha DeWolf, it should be streaming at 60 FPS. Looks like, let me see if Twitch is supporting it. Quality, yeah, I can set it to 1080 at 60. So hopefully it looks good. OBS is the new Chrome. Well, OBS has more reason to take up more RAM or processing speed than Chrome does. Chrome is just a browser that's designed sloppily. Is that a word? Sloppily-ish. And that is why it consumes a bunch of RAM, probably because Google's doing a bunch of behind-the-scenes tracking or whatever. But OBS is doing a lot of things for you. For one, it's capturing the video feed from this Blackmagic camera I'm streaming with right now. And that's a 1080 at 60 image feed. Yeah, I'm pumping that into the computer. It's recording that video feed and recording the audio from this dedicated microphone, all going through one adapter, by the way. I have the cam link and the microphone going through the same adapter, the quack quack, and it's compressing all of that audio and video together and uploading it simultaneously. So you're not just recording, you're not just uploading, you're doing both, and you're trying to keep it stable so that we don't drop any frames. And I'm happy to report in my first 10 minutes of live streaming, we have dropped 0 frames so far. I'll keep you guys posted. OBS tells me when frames are dropped. If there's other lag, it could be on your end or it could be even on Twitch's end. We've seen happen before where Twitch servers start to lag out a little bit, and that can cause issues. But at least on my end, it's running great so far, and I'm sure by the end of the live stream, it's probably going to be a lot hotter. But not really that hot as I'm touching it right now. I mean, it's warm. It's not like super duper hot to the touch, but really impressive for something like this. Tragic Toast, thank you for the 100 bits. He says, I feel like I want to get the new MacBook Air, but I'm still hooked into PC gaming, and I feel like no big-time gaming companies will ever port their games over. I would love to have a MacBook Air that could play Jedi Fallen Order or Star Wars Squadrons, but alas, it is a long shot. Yeah, I think Tragic Toast, I do have to agree with you there. As good as Apple may make their dedicated GPUs or integrated GPUs currently, as good as the performance may get, it doesn't really matter if third parties don't optimize for it. And we've seen time and time again that, you know, game devs don't really see much advantage to optimizing for the Mac, and I really don't blame them, to be honest, because there's not a huge gaming community on the Mac user base, so they don't really see how that's going to pay off for them. And it's going to take them money and time, a lot of money and time, to continuously provide updates for the Mac version of their app, or if they wanted to design the whole app to support Apple's Metal and their whole architecture of how graphics is handled on the Mac. It takes a lot of time, which, of course, with all their employees, takes a lot of money that they don't feel like is going to pay off because the Mac gaming user base is so small, which is why optimizing for the PC, which Microsoft owns Windows and Xbox, is pretty easy for, because you can optimize for both of them at the same time, and both of them are huge gaming markets. You have a ton of gamers in the PC community, and, of course, the Xbox is only gaming. That's its whole purpose. So yeah, it makes more sense for them to work on that. I did not order a HomePod Mini, for those asking. I tried to bring that up a couple times. I guess people don't watch everything, but no, I have way too many smart speakers, to be honest with you. I have several smart speakers I'm not even using, just because we got up a bunch of them back when I had the big office, and I wanted to have smart speakers in every room. And then obviously I gained a few brain cells, just not a lot, just a few, since that office, and realized that this is a waste of money. I'm going to start working in a smaller environment, but more efficient, kind of like this is a Tailosive on a 5 nanometer chip design, except the 5 nanometers is the size of this office. So it's efficient, but that means you get better performance as a whole because there's less money going towards things that don't matter. There's your analogy for Tailosive of the day. But yeah, I used to have smart speakers all over the place, and then when we downsized, now we have way too many smart speakers. So I sold 2 of my HomePod Minis. Sorry, not Minis, just HomePods. I sold 2 Space Gray HomePods. I still have 1 full-size HomePod in the living room, though no Apple Music, so it's not insanely useful, but I can AirPlay to it. And I have Google smart speakers all over the house. So I didn't really see the point in getting the HomePod Mini even to review, just because I'm sure I'm absolutely sure I'm gonna. If I tried it, I would be like, yeah, that sounds great. $100, you should get it. Don't get the full size HomePod, even at $300. It's probably not worth it, and I doubt that the sound quality difference between the HomePod Mini and the full-size HomePod is worth $200. I bet sound quality-wise, they're very good. And Randy's buying some, so we'll get his opinions on the podcast anyway, and I can ask him how he likes it. But I don't think me reviewing the HomePod Mini would have given you any new information. It would have just been me saying, yeah, sounds good. AA Twins donated 100 bits. Thank you very much. He asked, do you see any future for iPhone/iPad apps on Mac? Not really. I feel like when you optimize an app for touch and then you port it onto a computer that's built almost exclusively for keyboard and mouse, it just doesn't translate well. There might be some apps that do it okay. Maybe, yeah, I don't know. I was going to say Instagram, but even then, probably not great. You know, one thing I would consider one thing that would be nice about having the Instagram app on the Mac is that you could actually post photos and videos, but I haven't tried it myself. So maybe they don't even let you do that. But I've always found it annoying that if you were like editing a video or a photo on your Mac and you wanted to post it to Instagram, you would have to first send it to your phone to upload it. But even that, I don't think it's a big future, but a little bit. It'll be a small niche of apps that do work on the Mac, but I don't see it being like a huge, massive deal. I guess Netflix, yeah, but you can do all that. You can do YouTube, I guess, but all that you can just do on the web anyway. I don't really get what's the main advantage to doing that on a dedicated app opposed to just. You could download Netflix. Yeah, I guess. Maybe you could download content for offline consumption. I don't know. I just feel like Macs are usually near Wi-Fi. I mean, it's not like we have cellular Macs anyway. I suppose tablets are not laptops and laptops are not tablets. That's true, DeWolf. I agree with you. The real question is, one HomePod on sale for $200 or two minis? If I were you, Matthew, I would rather take the two minis. Honestly, I wish there was a trade-in program. I would love it if I could bring Apple my HomePod, and then they would just give me two HomePod minis in return. Because my guess is, based on the early review units and the early opinions I've seen on the HomePod mini, is that the sound quality is amazing for the size, and it sounds a lot better than most smart speakers at that size. So my guess is it's probably loud enough for most rooms. So if you have two, you can put one in your office and one in the bedroom or one in the living room or one in the bathroom. I don't care where you put them. But you have more options with two. You can have the stereo pair, whereas with just one HomePod, it's insanely loud. It's insanely good sounding, but you're probably never going to have it above 50% unless you're having some kind of party. And during the pandemic, there's not a lot of parties going around. So I would say definitely two HomePod minis is better than one normal HomePod. And that's when it's on sale at $200. Normally, the HomePod is $300. In that case, three HomePod minis, that gives you a stereo pair plus one extra for somewhere else. That's way better. Yeah, the biggest issue with HomePod still, like the last one, is connectivity, is the fact that it doesn't support everyone's favorite streaming services, and it still doesn't have Bluetooth support, which I find bizarre. It has the hardware for it, but CCR Runner says, I have two OG HomePods for my Apple TV. One rule sound for movies, putting minis everywhere else. There you go. Okay. Rich guys, I see. Tragic Toast, thank you for the 100 bits. If iPad apps added keyboard and mouse functionality like I wish Among Us would we could get so many more games on the Mac. True, that would help out a little bit, but I still think as their iPad versions of those apps, if you try to full screen them, they're going to have the black bars, and I just don't see it as being a top priority for a lot of developers. He donated again, Tragic Toast, thank you. If Apple could hook Boot Camp into Rosetta 2, that would get me to switch. Oh, that would be nice, being able to run Windows for that for the PC games. Maybe. Even then, I feel like I've used Boot Camp before on all of my previous Intel Macs, and I just the drivers never lined up very well, and there was always a hit in performance anyway, even though Windows was running natively. And I imagine that if we try to put Windows 10 on the M1 chip, it's still going to give us some kind of half-baked driver broken experience that, again, Can you game on the Mac? Yes. Is it good for gaming? No. That's two different things. Can it be done and should it be done is somewhat of the difference. And I see it come up a lot whenever I talk about performance of the M1 chip. Is like, can it run Crysis? Can it play Minecraft? Can it do this? Can it? It's like, at the end of the day, it's a Mac, and I think Apple Silicon helps Macs become better Macs. It does not help a Mac become a better gaming PC. I don't think that's what it's changing. Yeah, I was reading about that crossover application. Someone's developing it's kind of based on the Winebox formula of being able to run Windows applications on Apple Silicon, but I know there's probably a hit in performance there. And at the end of the day, it still comes down to that initial statement of, yeah, you can play games if you jump through certain hoops, but they're probably not going to run very reliably. And if your main concern is gaming, then Wine has never been that useful. Yeah, I'd have to agree. I've tried it a few times, and it never worked very reliably for me. Can you get games like the Minecraft iPad version of it? I'm not sure. You might be able to, but I don't even think does Minecraft support keyboard and mouse on the iPad yet? I thought they didn't bring that over, and everyone was asking them to. Is 8 gigs of RAM enough for the new MacBook Air/Pro? I guess it depends on what you do, but I always thought people overestimated the power of RAM. It never really makes that big a difference for me. So I edited today's tech video, which will drop after the stream. And I edited 2 videos yesterday on the MacBook Air, and it ran wonderfully during the editing process. The playback is quick. The load times on the preview is quick, and it looks great. And I'm adding color correction and text files and transitions. I'm adding all this stuff in, but it doesn't lag at all, and it runs very quietly, obviously, because there's no fan, and it doesn't even get very hot. It does go through the battery, I've noticed, quite a bit faster with Final Cut. And all the videos I edit are 4K at 60, by the way. Definitely doesn't drop as many frames as my iMac Pro does. So yeah, I've been very impressed with that performance, but while I was editing in Final Cut, I also had Twitter and Discord in the background and that kind of stuff. But you might be a more power intensive user than I am. So if you feel like 8 gigs isn't enough, maybe opt for the 16 gigs, I guess. But honestly, I don't think it'll make that big a difference. For most people come to the misconception that RAM means your computer runs faster. So if you have 16 gigs of RAM, things will export quicker or something like that, when in reality, RAM just has to do with more how much you're doing at once, and it makes it better at running lots of applications at the same time. But honestly, it's a MacBook Air. It's a 13-inch display, and I'm trying to stream with OBS and have the Safari window open with Twitch so I can read the chat at the same time. And I even went into settings, and I scaled down the text. I set it to more space, which is the smallest I can make the text on the MacBook Air, and it's still very crowded. And I feel like with a 13-inch device, there's really not that much multitasking you can do anyway, because there's such little screen real estate. I can barely keep, I have to click between OBS or Safari. I can't really have both open unless I start compressing both of them heavily and having them really narrowed. So I don't think RAM should be a huge concern. It's definitely not user upgradable, so that might be a good reason to get the higher RAM configuration. But yeah, people like Avnub is saying here, generally more RAM is for longevity reasons nowadays. So yeah, if this is something you're planning on buying and keeping for, I don't know, 5, 7, 8 years, then I could understand why you would want to opt for more RAM. But it's unified memory, which is important to remember. So the RAM in this MacBook is probably more similar to the RAM in iPads and iPhones, which is like they share RAM management between the GPU and the CPU very intelligently. And it's not the same as just building a PC. Like 8 gigs of RAM in a Windows machine is not the same as 8 gigs of RAM in a MacBook. Like the experience you'll get out of both of those is very, very different, despite them both being 8 gigs. I have not experienced any of the memory almost full alert, but if any of you have experienced that with 8 gigs, then basically, if you know you need 16, you do. But if you're coming from a machine with 8 and you haven't had issues, or you're coming from an older machine with 4 gigs of RAM, I don't think 16 is a huge deal. Let's see. What processor is my iMac Pro? I bought the base model iMac Pro, so it's the 8-core Intel Xeon processor, and it's getting up there. My iMac Pro is almost 3 years old now, and I think I've read about it somewhere, but there's something to do with how older Intel processors handle H.264 and H.265 video codecs, because whenever I record videos on my phone at 4K at 60, and I bring them onto my iMac Pro, it's always choppy for some reason. It's always like very jittery, and I can't get a smooth, seamless playback in Final Cut. But on the MacBook Air, it did it great. I just edited my vacation vlog, so I took a break for a week, and I went on an anniversary trip with my wife, and we filmed some stuff, and I wanted to edit it together into a little vlog for the Talks channel, and it ran great. No problems at all. There was no jitteriness. I was able to drop in cross dissolves and add some text and the cutaway shots and music and everything, and it was flawless. The one thing that the iMac Pro is still better at in my brief testing so far, though, is I would probably have to say the export times. I'm very, very impressed with the playback in the live time viewing of content within Final Cut. That's better than the iMac Pro. This is an improvement on a fanless $1,000 laptop, which is insane. But export time wise, it's not as groundbreaking. In I've exported how many now? I think around 3 videos that have been uploaded now. Cov Notorious, thank you for the tier 1 sub for 2 months. Appreciate it. It appears to be around it takes 3 seconds to export 1 second of 4K at 60 video. So basically what I mean by that is if the tech video is 10 minutes, it takes 30 minutes to export. And maybe that would be different if it had a fan, but in the speed tests I've seen online, it doesn't seem to be that different. The export times for all the machines with the M1 chip are pretty dang close. So maybe because the M1 chip kind of heats up and it has to throttle and slow down, even when throttled, it's much better than previous generation MacBooks, that's for sure. And it's by far miles and leaps and bounds better than the last fanless Mac, which would be the 12-inch MacBook. I remember trying to edit on that thing, and but yeah, it's 4K at 60 video, about 3 seconds per second. So a 5-minute video at 4K at 60 takes around 15 minutes to export. Definitely not bad. I'm not trying to say that's bad for a device like this. That's amazing. That's astounding for a fanless architecture and for a device this affordable, and also with such great battery life. Like I talked about this morning, I was using it, and if I wasn't using Final Cut and OBS, I feel like it could last me forever. I literally didn't drop 1% within a whole hour. It was crazy how good the high efficiency cores are for light tasks and that kind of thing. So yeah, I'm blown away by the performance. But if you're curious how the MacBook Air compares to my iMac Pro still has that export time advantage. I would say on the iMac Pro, it's closer to 1 second. So 1 second to export 1 second of 4K at 60. So if I make a 10-minute video on the iMac Pro, usually takes 10 minutes to export. If I make a 5-minute video, it takes 5 minutes to export. Maybe a little slower than that, but for the most part, that's what I've experienced in my past 3 years. So in my review, I'll do a direct side-by-side comparison so we can get an actual export test between the two of them. What about external display support? So I have some external monitors still in storage, but I've decided to just use the device as is because I would have to rearrange my whole desk and everything. But like, you can do it. There's 2 USB-C ports. They're both Thunderbolt 3. Yes, you can technically support up to a 6K 60 hertz monitor. So, I don't need to test that. It's on Apple's website. It's like, yeah, you can output to a Pro Display XDR if you want to. Is the 16 gigs of RAM worth the extra $200? I would say for most people, probably no. I don't think it makes that big a difference for most people who are buying a MacBook like this. So I would say no, unless you're using something that's really, really RAM demanding, like Chrome jokes, so many Chrome jokes. Yeah, Chrome uses lots of RAM. We all know this. I know it gets old after a while, but You can technically have two displays with Sidecar. Yeah, I believe you can just have one, but um, technically it's two if you're counting the MacBook Air display and the extras display. So that's why I kind of say it's one external monitor, but a two monitor setup as a whole. So I'm sure it works. I don't doubt that. I'm sure I could plug in an extra monitor and have some more space, but I'm okay just using. I did pair a Magic Mouse. This is the Magic Mouse I've been using with it. I used to have this paired to my Mac Mini, but now my Mac Mini is all factory reset and not running anything because I'm just trying to sell it, but no one wants it now, obviously. No one wants a Intel-based Mac Mini when the new ones just came out. So I'll probably end up just trading in my old Mac Mini. The trade-in value sucks, I know, but no one's going to want to buy it online for anything decent. So I'm probably just going to trade it in for when I get my actual Apple Silicon. Then again, most people who use MacBook Airs probably don't use external monitors that often anyway. If they do, there's probably just going to be one. Have you tested the M1 optimized Chrome? No, I haven't. I actually just, I've been using Safari for everything, and I was like, you know what? Safari works great. The reason I didn't install Chrome is because you can play 4K content on YouTube in Safari now, which was kind of one of the only reasons I kept Chrome around. And I guess I have Chrome on my iMac Pro because YouTube makes switching accounts complicated, and I run so many YouTube channels that sometimes it's just easier to leave one channel signed in on one browser and a different channel on another. But on this one, I haven't been using it very long, so I haven't minded just switching back and forth. Yeah, I know some of you are offering me $100. Apple's going to offer me $500 for my Mac Mini. So not great considering I paid over $1,000 for it 2 years ago, but I doubt anyone's going to want to spend $500 on it because for $100 more, you can get the M1 Mac Mini, and it'll be new. It won't be used, and it will probably be leaps and bounds faster. So will iPad Pros ever get proper multitasking like on a Mac? I don't know, to be honest with you. I feel like iPad, because it's more built for touch, they don't want to do Windows, and I don't mean Microsoft Windows. I just mean like apps running in a window. They would rather have everything split screen or take up the whole screen, and that honestly runs better for a touch interface, which is why I think Macs might keep their, as you call it, proper multitasking. Honestly, I kind of prefer the way the iPad handles multitasking. I can just fit the whole display with each app. I kind of like that better than having to resize all the windows all the time. I like multitasking on the iPad. They could improve it, I'm sure, if they start letting you run, 3 apps at once with split view and that kind of thing. But I'd rather do the split view than just all the random little windows in macOS. That might be something that they prefer the Mac be able to do. They want the Mac to have a purpose, and they don't want the iPads to completely kill it off. So they're trying to have a purpose for both, and they want to utilize the iPad for its strengths and utilize the Mac for its strengths. So I imagine the iPad multitasking somewhat staying the way it has been. Your Mac Mini should have more value because it was once used by the Apple sheet. Yeah, right. That's how that works. Try cut a Hollywood movie on your MacBook Air. Okay, I will do that. I switched from Chrome to Edge on Windows, and I made Google the default search engine. My laptop is so much faster. There you go. Chrome kind of sucks, not gonna lie. How long do you think Apple will support the M1 chip, same way as they do with their iOS devices? Probably longer, to be honest with you. Macs have a much longer average life of ownership, and Apple has been updating their Intel machines for often you'll see 7 or 8 years of support on some of the Intel. Not all of them, but some of them. Like I think the Trash Can Mac Pro is still getting updates, and that came out in like 2013. And when I look at the macOS Big Sur, why don't I look that up while I'm at it? I'm going to use, what's something funny? I've been using the Magic keyboard and mouse with my iPad Pro here for quite a while. And I've actually gotten used to typing and using the trackpad and then occasionally reaching up and tapping the display to the point that I've accidentally done that a few times on the MacBook Air when I'm typing something using the trackpad and then I want to open something and I'll reach up and tap it and I'm like, crap, nope, Macs don't do that. I got to remember. So the iPad I would still say is more fun to use hardware-wise. I mean, the MacBook Air has better performance with this M1 chip, and because it's capable of running all of the old Mac software like OBS and Final Cut, It's probably better for work stuff, but the iPad is still more fun to use. I prefer Face ID to Touch ID. I prefer 120 hertz. The design is cooler. I like this one size bezel all the way around, and it has, cameras on the front and the back. The cameras are way better. It's a 1080 at 60 camera, unlike the webcam on this thing, which is potato. Still not very good. And I can pull the iPad right off and use it just as a touchscreen if I want to. I would still probably recommend the iPad Pro over a MacBook Air for a lot of use cases. There are some for the Air that are better, but still, I mainly bought this to try out Apple Silicon because I think this is an exciting transition. And I think I don't think I'm going to keep the Air, though. Someone was asking that earlier. I really don't think the device suits my needs perfectly, and it doesn't very seamlessly replace my iMac Pro. It can. I'm convinced in my first day of using it now that I could exclusively run my entire business off of this machine if I needed to, but it's going to be a little bit more complicated because, for one, I only have 2 USB-C ports, so I'm already having to unplug and plug back in all these accessories and my CFast card reader, and there's no Ethernet and all that. So, but the Wi-Fi's been fast, obviously. Still 0 frames dropped, which is cool. But how hot is it? Let me feel. Yeah, it's getting a little hotter. Not like I can't touch it hot, but it's still, I'm feeling the warm. I need something with more USB-C ports anyway. So I'm going to use it as long as I can, and I want to use it to its full potential, and I want to push it to its limits like I am right now with the first OBS live stream with it. And I want to use it a lot, but I still plan on returning it, and thankfully my iMac Pro is still very capable, not running into lots of issues. It's still very fast and still able to export things in a timely fashion. And I do like the larger display, I must say. Going back to a 13-inch display, it's pretty crammed. It's kind of difficult to put Final Cut and Twitter and, trying to do all the things I do on my Mac with such a small display. Even with smaller text, it's really difficult to, I don't know. I'm just used to a 27-inch panel, I think is all. And I like desktops, and already it's felt pretty redundant having a 13-inch laptop and a 13-inch iPad Pro, using them both side by side, and they both have keyboards and they both have trackpads. And I'm going over here for video thumbnails and Twitter and Discord, but now I'm trying to be like, okay, I did test the MacBook, so now I'm going over here. It's too redundant, and I don't think I'm not sure. It depends what they do with pricing. Like whether or not I will opt for the 16-inch MacBook Pro with Apple Silicon, or I will get the redesigned iMac. Whichever one gives me better storage or better performance per dollar, I'll probably go with that one, even if it's just a matter of the iMac doesn't have a battery to worry about. But if they price the iMac absurdly high and they give it, I don't know, some type of Pro Display XDR type crap, if they make it super expensive, then no, I won't. Oh, I'm not 100% sold on the iMac. It depends how they price it. But if the 16-inch MacBook Pro is reasonably priced and has great performance, I might opt for that one, and I'll just turn it into a desktop when I need to. I'll be able to dock it, plug my external monitors into it, and use a keyboard and mouse, and basically just let the MacBook Pro turn into a little mobile tower where it sits on my desk and I plug a bunch of stuff into it, but then I mainly don't even touch it, and I use a different monitor for actual visuals and keyboard and mouse for all that. No cheese grater, Mike. We're not going with the cheese grater. That's not happening unless they substantially lower the price of it, but I don't think that's going to happen. Let's see. Being a filmmaker who edits my own films and ads for clients on my own projects, the M1 machines are really hitting it high. And I'm a 16-inch MacBook Pro user with an i9 and 5500M and the 32 gigs of RAM. I paid a crazy amount compared to what this is doing. That is pretty impressive. And the fact that the MacBook Air can even be compared to the 16-inch Pro and the iMac Pro is an achievement in itself. No, it will not outperform it in every metric, but the fact that it does outperform it in some metrics is incredible. And it's, once again, how Apple is teasing us with the M1 chip. They're just like flexing on us how powerful they can get. So we're 38 minutes in, and no, 0 frames have been dropped, to keep you guys updated. In my opinion, you get the iPad Pro with Magic Keyboard if you have a desktop of some sort already. However, you get the MacBook Air if you have no desktop at all. Ooh, okay, Avnub, that's probably a good universal suggestion. I might even, sorry if I forget to quote you on that, but I might even bring that up in my review, or not in review, in comparison video. If you have a desktop already and you're looking for a Apple-made laptop experience, iPad Pro is probably going to be best for you. But if you don't have a desktop and you need something to run desktop software, MacBook's probably the better way to go. Have the smart connector pins scratch the back of your iPad? Has that been a problem? No, the smart connector hasn't scratched. No, they haven't scratched at all. I don't see any scratches on the back. No reports there. iPad Pro is over 2 years old now. It's holding up great. Still my favorite Apple product. After M1 chip and iPhone 12 mini and all these thoughts and all that stuff, I still say iPad Pro from 2018, by far my most enjoyable to use Apple product. Which is lighter, MacBook Air or iPad Pro? Ooh, I want to pick this up. I'm just worried that the cables are going to get disconnected. Let me just... Hopefully I don't lose signal here. Here's here's the Air. This is what's powering everything. It's got the cables on the side. Okay. It's got some decent weight to it. And then pick this up. Yeah, they're pretty close. I mean, obviously, the iPad Pro can be detached, in which case the iPad Pro is definitely lighter. But with the case adds a lot of weight. There's a lot of weight added with the Magic Keyboard case. And I would say they're pretty dang close. You can't hear the fan. There is no fan. 100 bits from Chris Norton. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Hello, do what best for you. I will. I will continue to do that. Will you still buy the new Apple Silicon iMac to replace your current one, even if they don't come with a redesign? Ooh, don't say that. Oh, no. Oh, it has to be redesigned. Come on. It has to. Don't even joke about that. Okay, I'll entertain the idea for a second. If they don't redesign the iMac and they come out with the same old boring iMac design, except now it has Apple Silicon in it. Oh man, that's a hard question. I don't know. I really did enjoy the 16-inch MacBook Pro when I reviewed it. I felt bad sending it back, but I just knew that it was going to be redundant to have an iMac Pro and a 16-inch Pro, and I didn't want to get rid of the iMac Pro just yet. So I was like, yeah. Originally, before they announced Apple Silicon, my plan was to keep using my iMac Pro until they did a spec boost for the 16-inch Pro. And technically, that day has still not happened. And now that they've announced Apple Silicon, I'm like, okay, I'm definitely going to make sure my next Mac is an Apple Silicon Mac. I didn't think the transition would be this soon or this fast. So I'm actually really glad I bought my iMac Pro when I did, because it was far enough away from the silicon, more like silicant. I was far enough away from the Apple Silicon transition for it to not feel like a ripoff. You know, in 2017, there were very vague rumors of Apple bringing their own silicon to the Mac, but it wasn't very concrete yet. And for the price I was paying, the performance was really good, and I loved the design, and it's aged beautifully. It's still running great, and I've used the iMac Pro for just about 3 years now, and it's still able to keep up with editing and exporting all my 4K at 60 content. So I'm very happy I bought it when I did, but I think it should be able to comfortably last me until whenever the next Apple Silicon iMac comes out. I guess to entertain or answer your question, I guess I wouldn't be completely against buying another boring iMac design again if it's priced really well and it has good storage and CPU performance. Like in recent history, if you wanted the best performance for $1, I would have been better off buying a 16-inch MacBook Pro instead of a 27-inch iMac. For one reason alone, which may seem like a stupid reason, but it's the truth. I want 4 USB-C ports. I've just gotten so comfortable with that. Before the iMac Pro, I did all my editing on a 15-inch MacBook Pro from 2016, and that was like the first MacBook Pro that went all in on USB-C, and I love that thing. It aged pretty great for me, and I liked using it, but I got very, very comfortable using USB-C accessories, and I don't like having to unplug different ones and plug new ones in. I'm already doing it with the Air, and my desk looks like a complete mess right now because of all the wires that I have to leave unplugged and ready to plug in when I do come here and sit down. But if I want to stream, I have to unplug them all over again. It's just, I need 4 USB-C ports, and the 27-inch iMac still, to this day, only comes with 2, even if you max it out, and it's $6,000 or $9,000 or whatever. And it has 8 terabyte SSD, and it has the best GPU, and it has the best i9. Even then, it's still only 2 USB-C ports, and they have plenty of old USB-A legacy ports, and that is not what I'm interested in. I don't need a bunch of old USB-A ports. I want to make sure, if the 27-inch iMac had 4 USB-C ports, it might be a different discussion. And if I could get really great CPU performance and really great storage with that model, then I guess I wouldn't be against buying a boring, dated iMac design again. But I would honestly much rather just go with a 16-inch Pro for the sake of, when I used that, the bezels were really thin. The display felt huge. The display was gorgeous. And I could also dock it to a monitor if I needed to and still have 3 USB-C ports extra. So if they don't redesign the iMac, which I really hope you're not right about that, I really hope they redesign the iMac, because then it would be an easy yes. If they come out with the redesigned iMac and it just looks like a big iPad Pro on a stick, 1,000 times yes, that's what I want to get, as long as it's priced fairly. If it's like $9,000, I won't do it. If it's $6,000, I probably won't do it. I don't want to drop that much money on a computer again. I did it with the iMac Pro, and it was a lot of money at the time, and it was good because it has aged well and has been able to keep up with my new cameras and my high video files and that kind of thing. But I'm not planning on making another big jump like that with my camera, so there's really no need for me to do another big jump with CPU and GPU to the point that, and I definitely don't need XDR, extreme dynamic range, and that kind of thing. Do you think ProMotion will ever make its way to the MacBooks? Not soon. I don't think it's as important, because when they first introduced ProMotion to the iPad, it was mainly for the Apple Pencil, which I don't think is coming to the Mac. And when you're talking about laptops and desktops, 120 hertz is mostly helpful for gaming, which Macs are not really utilized for, and it would kind of nuke your battery. I won't say never, because Apple Silicon is really power efficient, and if they found a way to do LTPO panels with the Mac, it sounds like they're working on mini LED right now, so that's probably what they're mainly focused on, not 120 hertz, but maybe in time, if Apple Silicon can get really efficient and they can talk to the right supply chains and get variable refresh rate, maybe I could see them bringing ProMotion, but it's probably not going to be in the next 2 to 3 years. I could see that coming maybe in 4 or 5 years. Do you use any music production apps like Ableton Live? Any word on compatibility on those? Sadly, I don't know, but my friend Randy is an audio engineer, and he does a lot of music production. So if he gets his hand on an Apple Silicon Mac, which I'm hearing he might, because he's due for an upgrade, we should definitely check in with him on the Tech Podcast and see what he says. Did Apple ever say how many years of guaranteed software updates for MacBooks? No, but they usually do a lot. I mean, I think it's typically like 6 or 7 years for pretty much every MacBook. So they didn't promise anything, but someone was saying Linus was suggesting something like that. Let's see. I have a 13-inch 2016 Pro with no touch bar, so I've never had one. Is the touch bar that bad that I should go with the Air? I don't think I need the fan anyway. Personally, I like the touch bar. People seem to fall on either side of it. There are some people who hate it and some people who love it. I fall on the side who loves it. I find it mainly helpful for when you're watching a YouTube video, you can tap one button and activate picture-in-picture, which is really cool. And when you want to change volume and display brightness, you just tap and swipe, which is way easier and faster than having to press a button over and over again. Just turn down the volume, turn up the volume. Instead, you just swipe back and forth. Also, when you're texting with iMessage, the predictive text is really helpful. And you can bring up emojis if you're texting on your Mac and that kind of thing. So I really like the touch bar. But if you're coming from a 13-inch Pro from 2016, the MacBook Air is definitely going to be an update for you. So you'll probably be fine with just the Air. Save yourself some money. I don't think you're missing out on too much. Let's see. What if Tim Apple say we don't have any new ideas for the new designed iMac? This iMac shell will stay. This iMac shell will stay forever. Yeah, I'm sure he would go up on stage and say that. We don't have any ideas. We can't make the iMac better, so we're just going to leave the device the same. Do you see Apple cutting support short for M1 Macs, like what Linus is suggesting? I haven't seen his video explaining why. Maybe you guys could summarize it in the chat. Why does he think this will change? Like, Apple provides long-term support with the iPhone, which has Apple Silicon, and they provide long-term support on the iPad, which has Apple Silicon, and they've provided long-term support on the Intel Macs. So why would transitioning to Apple Silicon make them cut short? Like, I don't understand the logic there. Why do people think it'll get less support there? Again, I haven't seen the video, but I don't know. From what I've heard of what Linus is saying, he seems to not be terribly excited about the ARM transition, which if I were Linus, I would probably not be that excited too, because it means that the future of computers and the future of laptops and desktops is going to involve a lot of non-upgradable systems that are really power efficient and really powerful, but they're going to end up not getting you're not going to be able to upgrade the RAM. You're not going to be able to update the storage, which if that's what a lot of your career is, and in Linus's case, that's a lot of what he does, is custom builds and building your own stuff and working on PCs and configuring your own parts. And ARM doesn't really allow for a lot of that. I think it does allow for it a little, but not as much. There's definitely a lot less customization and modularity when it comes to the ARM architecture. Linus thinks this is the first iPhone/iPad/watch that got very limited support. I'm sorry, I disagree. Mainly because when the iPad first came out, I think that was one of the first Apple Silicon chips ever. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the first iPad was like one of the original, like, initial Apple Silicon chips they ever made. So they were kind of new to the game, and performance-wise, it wasn't that groundbreaking. I mean, it was okay, but it was mainly just a proof of concept to prove that Apple could make their own processors. But I don't think anybody was super duper impressed with Apple Silicon until a few years down the road when they started surpassing everybody else. Also, the first Apple Watch did not get that many years of support because it was the very first watch they ever made. So the CPU was the first of its kind, running on very, very little power and very, very low performance. But over time, the Apple Watch CPUs have improved and gotten a lot faster. Whereas this is not Apple's first laptop. This is not Apple's first MacBook. This is just the first time they're using their own silicon in their own hardware. So I don't think that instantly guarantees little support, especially when they're still shipping Intel Macs that are going to get several years of support. Yeah, the iPad was the first product with Apple Silicon. So yeah, I don't see this as big of a first as the first iPad or as the first Apple Watch. Those had very limited silicon because they were the first of their kind, but this is not the first of its kind. It's just the first time Apple's hardware has been getting their own custom silicon, and it's super duper fast, super duper efficient, and on very next generation tech. It's a 5 nanometer chip, so it's built on a very similar framework to the A14 chip. So I don't know. It's a theory. We don't really know what's going to happen. I don't think even Apple knows what's going to happen. I guess it depends on how CPU and GPU development goes for Apple in the next few years. My guess is no. I don't think you're going to get cut short on software support. Matthew says, to be fair, the first generation Intel Macs were not supported for a long time, along with the very last PowerPC Macs. The last PowerPC Mac came out in 2005 and stopped getting support in 2009. The first Intel Macs came out in 2006 and stopped getting support in 2011. That's still 4 or 5 years, though. Meanwhile, the majority of 2007 Macs were supported up until 2016. Yeah, they might be. I don't know. They could be shorter, but still, I feel like 5 years isn't that bad. Uh, and I personally, I think just because of how futuristic and modern the M1 chip is, and because Apple's been building laptops very similar to this for a long time, I wouldn't be shocked if they still get 6 or 7 years. I don't know. How long has the current MacBook design been going on for? Is there like a design cycle change like the iPhone? Not really. I mean, for a while, there seemed to be a pattern of like every 4 years they update the MacBook design, but it's been 4 years now. When they first introduced the MacBook Pros with their thinner design and USB-C and everything, that was 2016, and 2020 is just about over, and there wasn't really that big of a new design, so software support for Windows is actually pretty decent. The problem with support for Windows is that it doesn't stop. They keep sending you updates when you don't want them, and the updates don't do that much. Yeah, I guess it's not too bad for Windows compared to Android, which is like 3 years and you're done. How long has the current... Yeah, we answered that, sorry. Do you think Apple will update Macs with Apple Silicon annually like the iPhone, or every 18 months like the iPad Pro? That's a good question. Well, the reason I'm torn on that is because in years prior, because they wanted to give MacBooks the latest Intel or the latest GPU, and Intel's updates were not in sync with AMD's updates, Apple has pretty consistently been updating the MacBook Air and MacBook Pro like every 6 months. The base models anyway, the 13-inch configurations. It's been like 6 months, here's another update. 6 months, here's another update. And they do these little like minor site refreshes all the time. I don't think they'll do it every 6 months, but if they're moving towards their own silicon, I could still see them doing it maybe once a year, kind of like iPhones. So maybe every October or every November, a new Apple silicon chip comes out, the M2, the M3, and that's more powerful than before and better power efficiency. I could see them doing that, but also you bring up a good point that, iPad Pros don't really do once a year. They do every 18 months. And there's other Macs like the Mac Mini that get updated like every 2 to 4 years. And then there's things like the Mac Pro, which get updated every 7 years. So with Macs, it's not as consistent and it's a little harder to track. I wouldn't be completely shocked if they introduced a new M series chip once a year. That sounds pretty believable because that's what they do with iPhones, A12, A13, A14. So what do you think the next Mac needs hardware-wise besides a new camera and more USB/I/O? Yeah, that's a pretty big one. I would say, yeah, for one, new camera, better I/O. LTE, I think, would be a big appreciated feature. Notice I didn't say 5G. Yeah, I think cellular, you're doing it on the iPads, which have smaller batteries. Why can't they bring cellular to the MacBooks? I feel like that would be kind of sick if you could take your MacBook with you on a trip or on the bus and actually use it and have internet wherever you are. And they've been doing it with some Surface Pros. Microsoft has had some cellular models with their lineup, so I feel like that would be pretty dope to have cellular. Face ID also would be a big one, but that kind of ties into his webcam comment. Other than better webcams, Face ID would be a nice one. If I could just open the laptop and it looks at me and unlocks. And then, of course, we have Memoji support and AR emoji or whatever it's called. Yeah, just that's not the main drive, but that's how Apple would advertise it. Now you can send Memojis with your Mac. That's probably how it would work. They would have to beef up the display panel a little bit to fit all those Face ID sensors, but that biometric would be awesome. What else? Better speakers would be good. Better batteries. Well, they're doing that, I guess. Let's see. You think the new chip for the next iPad Pro will be significantly better than the Air? Yeah, I'm kind of convinced that Apple Silicon is going to be alongside the iPad Pro, but not the same. I saw some people saying, like, why don't they put the M1 chip in the next iPad Pro? But I personally think they're actually going to move away from that because they want Macs to have their own performance advantages. They want the Mac to stand on its own and be like, well, if you want real performance and power, you got to go with a Mac. whereas the iPad Pro is still fast and probably still going to beat out most PC laptops, but it's not going to be Mac levels of performance because it's smaller and lighter and the battery's not as big. So yeah, my guess is that whatever the iPad Pro gets next, which will probably be A14X, it might be similar to the M1, but the M1 will still be better or something like that. We'll see, I guess. But that will make a very interesting comparison, because for the past few years, we've always had iPhone CPU, iPad CPU, iPhone CPU, iPad CPU. And it's pretty much always been the newer, later, more expensive iPad Pro has the fastest CPU and GPU. It's better than the iPhone because it's larger and it has more screen real estate, so it needs a beefier GPU. So you kind of get extreme performance with the X chip, and that's what helps power the iPad. But now we're going to have Mac CPU and GPU and iPad CPU and GPU, and seeing how those compare should be somewhat interesting. My guess, is that the A14X chip will be fairly close to the M1, but not quite as good. Maybe less efficiency cores or something like that, or I don't know. I feel like it'll run on less power or be more efficient in some way like that, but they'll be pretty dang close. So M1X next with 12 performance cores, 4 efficiency cores, maybe. The naming thing is impossible to predict, and it very rarely leaks. I mean, no one leaked the M1 chip. That was a completely unique name that no one thought they would call it. But they did it. A14X will just be the M1 without the Thunderbolt controller. Yeah, there's a theory. There you go. It'll just because the iPad Pro won't have Thunderbolt 3, I guess. It'd be nice if it did, though. I wish it would. Let's see. They could call it M1X, but they also could end up calling it the M2 or something like that. My best guess is that they're most likely going to bring the next Apple Silicon chip announcement is going to be for the rest of the 13-inch MacBook Pros. And they won't have dedicated GPUs. And yes, I do think Apple's going to start making their own dedicated GPUs, but they're going to leave those for the 16-inch Pro and the iMac redesign. And then, of course, the Mac Pro at the end. So I don't know what they'll call it or anything, but yeah, I don't think that they're going to just rely on integrated GPUs for everything. Doesn't really make a lot of sense to use integrated GPUs on bigger machines like the iMac or the Mac Pro. Just to be like, hey, you don't need dedicated GPUs anymore. We can build it all into the 5nm chip. I think at a certain point that dedicated GPU helps out, kicks in. Yeah. I wonder if they'll make, I hope they make dedicated GPUs. I don't like macOS. I've been using it for a year now, and I always come back to Windows, but I'm really impressed with Apple Silicon and Rosetta 2. Apple did something Microsoft has been failing for years now, make an ARM computer without big compromises. Yeah, I'm the exact opposite. I tried to use Windows for a few years, and I couldn't stand it, but I'm a big fan of macOS, and I love it. And I'm very impressed. I think this is probably one of the most exciting things going on for Apple right now. Outside of this Apple Silicon transition, there's really not that much to be excited for with future generation Apple products. iPhone design is going to look pretty much just like this for the next few years. And even with the mini LED, I know there's mini LED coming to the Mac probably in the second half of next year. And I was just using this display today. I was editing videos on it, and I was watching a few videos on the MacBook Air, and I was like, this display is just fantastic. The brightness is amazing. The colors look great. It's super rich. Like, I don't understand how I could be using the MacBook Air and just be like, the colors aren't good enough, or the blacks aren't inky enough, or they're not dark enough. I'm sure mini LED is better, and I don't doubt there will be improvements in color accuracy and all that kind of thing. And they'll probably start calling it MacBook Air XDR display, whatever. But honestly, I don't think it's a great reason to wait. A good reason to wait is you want better I/O. You want more USB-C, or you want a dedicated GPU, and you're waiting for the M1X chip or the M2 chip that's going to go in the higher end Macs. That's a good reason to wait. I get that. Most likely going to see that dedicated GPU, and the more higher end Apple Silicon Macs probably see that later in 2021, which is not far away, right? It's like, we got less than 6 weeks until 2021. So there's amazing things on the horizon But mini LED, I really don't even think is that great a thing to wait for. I don't think it'll be a super important feature. Glassfire73, thank you for the tier 1 sub as well. Sub for 16 months. Holy cow. Why? Why so long? Appreciate it, though. Would you say the performance on the M1 Air is overkill for most buyers? Yeah, I would say probably for most people who bought the MacBook Air beforehand, M1 chip is probably more powerful than it needs to be. So, some part of me is thinking, like, why didn't Apple make a different chip that isn't as crazy powerful, but maybe somewhat efficient and could expand battery life and be cheaper to produce? I don't know. Maybe it's not that practical to make a lower performance but cheaper chip. And maybe this is Apple not even trying. Maybe this is the performance we get when they don't put much effort into it. So I don't know. I don't really know the ins and outs of what makes most sense. But for most people I know who would buy MacBook Airs, they were usually buying it for school or buying it for college. And they use it for like Word documents and PowerPoint and browsing the web and watching videos. And I feel like most people who bought the MacBook Air were not people who were doing a bunch of Final Cut editing and OBS live streaming. And yet now, here I am. We're an hour and 5 minutes in. OBS has not dropped a single frame this whole time. And you guys say the stream looks pretty good at 1080 at 60. This is not what the Air was really meant to do. And yet now it can do it thanks to the M1 chip. So yeah, I think I'll agree with that statement and say it is overkill for most buyers. And yeah, Spearman, I agree. The A12Z chip would have been fine if they just took the iPad CPU and put it in the MacBook Air. It probably could have covered everybody's day-to-day tasks, but Apple wanted to go above and beyond. So the upgrade from M1 to future chips in terms of performance will never be a bigger leap from Intel to Apple Silicon, right? Probably. Yeah, it feels like the leap from Intel to Apple Silicon is going to be the biggest one. Most likely, yeah. I'm still glad Apple did bring the performance to the Air. Yeah, it's cool. It definitely brings a lot of flexibility to me, because now I'm like, well, dang, I can do all of my live streaming and all of my video editing on a MacBook Air if I want to. Well, that opens up some possibilities, because beforehand, when I was in the market for a Mac, it was like, okay, I have to pick something with good performance, so I have to either go with a 16-inch Pro or an iMac. But now it's like, oh, well, I can pick anything. If once the whole transition is made and all the Macs have been switched to the M1 chip. Yeah, it's amazing. Anyway, I got to get going, guys. We've been streaming for a while now, but got a tech video that'll drop shortly, so stay tuned for that. And I appreciate your bits and your Twitch Prime. Sorry I couldn't answer all your questions, but better luck next time. And before I forget, you can listen to these in the podcast app or on Spotify if you want, in the form of audio. I'll be converting them and uploading them to the podcast app if you'd like. So you can listen to them after the fact if you didn't catch the whole stream if you want. Anyway, thank you for the bits, Spearman874. See you guys. Have a great day. Take care. Bye-bye. And good job, MacBook Air. You did it.